Welcome back to Season 5 of Porcelain Peak, a strange and scary podcast featuring chop talk, trivia, and deep dive main discussions into the odd and unusual.
This week we're ripping. This week we're stripping.
Yes, I'm one of your hosts, Tone. Please, keep going. And I'll just talk over it.
No. We got to see, that was the little teaser so people keep watching into the video. We don't want people to click out if I get totally naked right now.
That's fair. Anyway, I'm joined by John Hollaback at ya and Anthony. And this week, for Chop Talk, we're going to share a slasher Christmas remake, I guess.
Of sorts, yeah.
Yes, then we're going to play trivia. Someone's on a hot streak.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's going to be even spicier when you get naked. And then for our main discussion, we're continuing with Nonfiction November, and we are wrapping it up this month with a discussion on Jack the Ripper. So stay tuned.
We discovered who Jack the Ripper is.
It's Kelly Ripa. That's how she disguised it. Because he's British.
No, it was actually Rip Torn.
Why don't you take an axe and chop it open?
All right, boys, we're recording later than usual again. At time of recording Black Friday. How were your holidays?
Oh, shit, it is Black Friday, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
My mom was like, we were going to go to the mall, but the exit was packed. And I was like, yeah, it's fucking Black Friday. What were you thinking?
I remember going one year with friends at like midnight of the night before and like wait. Oh, shit.
So your alarm to get out of bed?
Yeah, that's my 2:40 p.m. alarm that it's time for me to finally slug my way out of bed.
I don't know your life.
No, it's Friday, and typically I would be working on a Friday, so that was my alarm to go back to work after my lunch. But instead, I get to hang out with you guys and not eat delicious food. So Black Friday. You guys excited? You guys getting anything? I'm gonna get a
wearing it. I bought this today.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah,
You're crazy.
You heard seen the newspaper articles about corduroy jackets? They're making headlines and backlines.
So how were your Thanksgiving was the original question.
mine was okay. It was very low key. I ate pizza.
Nice.
Yeah.
Honestly, man, nothing wrong with that. My Thanksgiving was also pretty low key. Went over to my grandma's. My sister and my dad cooked a delicious dinner. It was probably the first time I've ever seen somebody cook a Thanksgiving dinner where it ended up being like exactly the right amount of food for everybody to like have as much as they wanted, and then it was gone. Like there wasn't a ton of leftovers. I was like, whoa, you guys really nailed it. Almost the entire dinner was just everybody going, this is surprisingly good. They were all shocked that my sister and my dad had been able to put this together and make a Thanksgiving dinner, but it was nice. My brother was there and he was really well behaved, and it was actually nice to get to see him, so we had a good time.
You didn't mention him initially, so I didn't want to bring it up because I was like, that seems like a sore subject.
Yeah, no, he was totally cool and was going to hang out with some friends after, and I think he was in a good mood because he was going to be getting out of there and like going. I think he was going to Fresno for a couple days, so but yeah, everything was great, and I only spent about an hour there, and then my dad was like, okay, I'm going over to a friend's house to watch the Vikings game, and I was like, cool, I'm going to sneak out with you. And so I went back home and watched John Wick.
The classic
perfect Thanksgiving. Yeah. Bringing the family together, John Wick.
I think he's more just tearing families apart.
Yeah, but it was a good Thanksgiving.
Good. I'm glad you guys had a good time. Mine sucked. I am still sick, and I felt like shit all week. Unfortunately, I don't know what's up, but I'm feeling way better today, which is good because we're recording.
Yeah. Well, now you got the Christmas spirit in you.
I do. Yeah, I watched a bunch of cheesy Christmas movies yesterday, like really shitty. You know the plot because they're all the same ones. You know what I mean?
Sometimes that's enough though to just like get you up into that slightly cheery mood, get you a little bit of that peace on earth and goodwill toward men and such. Yeah.
For people. All right. Well, we got some news.
Speaking of Krampus.
Yeah.
Actually, no, not Krampus. The Grink. You guys fans of the Grink?
We are. Yeah. As a whole.
Are we fans of the Grink?
Do I know the Greek? Grink him. I hardly knew him. Yeah. So there's a new trend sweeping the nation where they're these characters that I assume are in some sort of weird creative commons limbo with these IPs. We talked earlier in the season or last season about Winnie the Pooh, the Blood and Honey movie that was being made.
Is that real?
Yeah.
I watched the trailer and it looks so fake. It looks like a fan-made trailer. It looks I was like, this doesn't look real at all.
Yeah, I think that just is because it's somebody
That
probably
low
just
budget?
jumped on the
Yeah.
idea of getting this IP because the weird thing there was that they can use Winnie the Pooh, but they can't use the Winnie the Pooh with the red shirt that is
But
owned
it has
by
it in
Disney.
the trailer.
Yeah, but they can't. It can't be the same design, I guess.
Oh.
But the actual Winnie the Pooh stories, the A.A. Milne
in the
stories,
public
are
domain
in
now.
public domain, and I assume that because what we're talking about here is there on December 9th in theaters, we are getting an Amy Schumer co-written Grinch slasher movie called The Mean One.
See, this is fucking David Gordon Green and Danny McBride's fault.
Yeah,
Where it's like comedians going into horror.
yeah, pretty much.
Also, update on Blood and Honey. It is coming for one day through Fathom Events on February 15th of next year, and it is apparently a real thing.
Weird, dude. It looks so fake. I think I've seen this Grinch one trailer,
Does
and it looked like a normal movie.
Blood and Honey look any better than Ghoster in terms of quality? So yeah, we're getting. I assume they're not going to call him the Grinch at any point during this, but I guess the plot that I read is that a character called Cindy, you know who, had her parents murdered very Silent Night, Deadly Night style by the Mean One like 20 years earlier, and now she's an adult. And
Is that what this movie is called?
It's called The Mean One.
Yeah.
And by The Mean One, and he comes back to hack and slash again. One interesting little tidbit is that The Mean One is being played by David Howard Thornton, who plays Art the Clown in the Terrifier movies. So at least, dude's got a good face, and I could definitely see him being a Grinch. So
It'd be crazy if they convinced Jim Carrey to come back and reprise the role.
yeah, as like a dark
Fucking
slasher
sick,
Grinch. Like
dude.
honestly, he would probably spend the entire movie just talking about how much he hates Trump. They'd be like, "No, Jim, that's not in the script." So yeah, we're getting that December 9th, I guess, in theaters. Probably going to be a Fathom Events type thing where it's going to be for one day on December 9th. So
we've got that. We've got the David Harbour Violent Night, and then what's the robot one?
Christmas Bloody Christmas by the guy who did the movie Bliss and VFW. So going to be very neon, very bloody like his other movies. And also I saw that there are plans to make a killer deer version of Bambi.
Really?
Where Bambi's on the hunt. Yeah, and killing people. I assume in revenge.
That sounds like a Kevin
I
Smith
assume in
movie.
revenge for his mother. Yeah. So yeah, that's about all the news there. I'm not rushing to see this, but if it pops up on Shudder at some point, I might check it out.
You've said on regular occasion that you're Irish.
Oh, because I'm not Russian.
Dude, between this and the bonus, I don't know what's up with you.
Spinning comedy gold like Rumpelstiltskin. Little bit of news if you give a shit about Scream 6, which I really, really, really don't.
But for some news, what do you got?
First main cast leaked photo came out ahead of a trailer that we're supposedly going to get next month.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so because the movie comes out in March, I think.
Oh, shit.
So yeah, pretty close. So there was a leaked.
What the fuck? When did the last one just come out?
I think it was like December of last year or something, or November, or
Dude,
was it
that's
this year?
crazy.
Was it 2022?
I'm
I
on
think
it.
it was like
I'm
January
I'm
of
researching.
2022.
I
Actually,
thought it was this year.
yeah, maybe it was this year. It's been a long ass year.
Weird, dude.
Yeah, so the cast photo, the biggest thing about this is, it's Jenna Ortega and all of the rest of the people, but also Hayden Panettiere right up front as Kirby. There was also a photo that came out that's supposedly from the movie of Ghostface in a convenience store with a shotgun, and people are losing their fucking minds about how it betrays the spirit of Ghostface for him to have a shotgun, and people just get way too... I mean, it's the sixth fucking Scream movie. Like,
Also, it's
Scream
different
5 came out in January this year.
It's different people, so their MO would be completely different.
Also, it could just be somebody wearing the Ghostface mask to rob a convenience store. It's supposed to be in New York, so I could see like that people are wearing the Ghostface mask like to commit crimes or whatever.
Yeah.
What's the douchebag from fucking the new Halloween movie? What's the
Corey?
Yeah, Corey. Yeah, maybe it's Corey.
I would hope that Corey becomes like a running gag throughout all these franchises. Like just
Same
shows up as
actor.
I'm the new Ghostface. Yeah, so that, and people are just getting upset and wound up and talking about. I saw somebody do a whole fucking dissertation the other day about how the only way to save the franchise now is to bring Matthew Lillard back, and it's like
That makes no sense.
yeah, and it's like why would that save the franchise outside of you like Matthew Lillard and want him to come back? Like, how does that save the franchise?
He can only come back as Shaggy, just like Zoinks Ghostface.
Yeah. Honestly, I'd be 100% into it. Have James Gunn write it. So that's pretty much it for Scream 6. I've been trying not to get too into, like, because people have been tearing apart, like, what does the new logo mean? Is this the possible logo? And, like,
logo.
all this stuff, about whether they're going to call it Scream 2 or Scream 6 and all this stuff. I'm like, I really don't care. I just hope it's decent when it comes out.
Call it Scream again. Let's fucking do it. Just Scream for a third time.
Still screaming.
Scream, also. And then another small piece of news. This is the last bit that I have for Chop Talk. It was a pretty slow week, which makes sense going into the holidays. Not as big a time for horror news. But Caitlin Cronenberg, the daughter of David Cronenberg, is also entering the director's scene. So we're going to have 3 Cronenbergs directing films. Hers is called Humane. It stars Jay Baruchel and is going to be some sort of like post-apocalyptic environmental thing where this dude gets his whole family together and announces to them that he is going to, I guess, like euthanize all of them, and then like hell breaks loose in some way. So
Wow.
Yeah. So definitely
right in line with
the typical Cronenberg fare. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. But not a lot happening in the news sphere.
I like Jay Baruchel. It'd be interesting to see if that's a fun thing, or as fun as a Cronenberg movie can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, Brandon is more my jam out of the 2 that I've seen their movies.
Yeah.
Most recently, anyway. So hopefully, she steps up to the bar.
Yeah, and Brandon's working on something new also. I forget. I've seen some stuff about it. So he's got a new movie coming out soon. So yeah, it's just going to... And David Cronenberg, I think, is working on like 2 more movies right now. So we're going to be getting... It's going to be a...
Crimes of the Future.
Yeah, it's going to be a good couple years for the Cronenbergs, I think.
What?
And I'm just...
Oh. Do you look like you got something to say?
No, it was just the just the constant like cyclical quality of having a movie and then doing another movie called Crimes of the Future. That's completely different. It has nothing to do with the previous Crimes of the Future.
Yeah, I love that.
And it's like Led Zeppelin, where every record is called Led Zeppelin, like Led Zeppelin 2. So he's just going to do Crimes of the Future, and then like a little 2. Crimes of the Future
just
3.
in the corner.
Yeah. Completely unrelated movies.
It makes sense because we got how many Halloween movies that are just called Halloween?
Yeah, totally. And really, there's so much crime, I would assume, in the future.
Much future.
Yeah, so much future.
I mean, arguably infinite.
Yeah, arguably. It makes no fucking sense. All right, well, that's gonna wrap it up for Chop Talk. We'll go ahead and get started with that trivia.
That Christmas house of wax, the fog, piranha. It's one of those, right?
All right, before we get started with those trivia questions, the man, the boy.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and hit us with a little
The man boy.
trivia tune.
Man, boy, pig.
Half man, half boy, half pig.
I'm super cereal right now.
Your trivia tune this week is going to be an easy one because I've already referenced it several times in our bonus episode.
Okay.
Trivia. Trivia. Trivia.
Psycho Killer.
Trivia. Oh, trivia. Yep. It is Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads because we're going to be talking about a Psycho Killer, one of the most infamous ones.
And we're just a few talking heads in here, you know what I mean?
Whoa, dude. That's hella deep.
That is hella deep. All right, well, Anthony is coming off a 2 streak.
Yeah.
Correct? 2 independent streak.
Yeah.
Technically, you've had part of a win throughout the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, really, you could say I've had the longest streak of the season because we all won every time for the first, 5 or 6 episodes.
Even outside of ties, though, you still have had the longest streak of the season.
Yeah.
With 2. Anyway.
I'm feeling pretty good.
You should be. It has been an adjustment going from that low ball game we were playing before to Trivial Pursuit.
Everybody listening was like, dude, I feel hella smart this season. I don't know what it is, but maybe listening to 4 seasons of Porcelain Peak, finally got my knowledge up, and they're just like rocking it, and then we get to this trivia.
Hit him with
they're
a
like,
diesel truck.
Yeah, it's like, never mind.
Yeah, so we're going to continue with Trivial Pursuit. I'm going to read to John. John's going to read to Anthony. Anthony will read back to me, and we'll go through each category on these cards. Are you guys ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Ready, Freddy.
All right, buddy. Hit me with that first category.
First category is monster.
Okay. John, in Fright Night from 1985.
Fright Night.
What is the name of the neighbor Charlie suspects is a vampire?
Oh, God.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question.
That's a good question.
Shit.
You're the Fright Night expert. You're the resident Fright Night expert.
Oh, yeah, I already got the name rolling around in my noggin.
I don't know why Richard is jumping out at me.
Richard?
What the fuck, Richard?
Is that your guess?
Richard Dreyfuss.
Richard Jewell.
Your last name wasn't too far off, but that is incorrect.
Jerry Dandridge.
Jerry Dandridge.
Oh, Chris Sarandon.
Yeah, I could picture his face.
Yeah, I always forget that that's where Susan Sarandon gets the Sarandon part of her name, because they were married.
I did not know that. I was just going to ask if they were related.
Yeah, they were married for a while in like the beginning of her career, and by the time they separated, she had made a name off of Susan Sarandon, so she kept the name after they split. Yeah,
That is cool. Extra facts.
yeah, I learned about Susan Sarandon.
Are you ready for your question?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Ooh.
What was the country of origin for the film Nosferatu from 1922?
Such good audio.
People start looking for like ghostly artifacts in the sounds I'm making. I think I heard a "help me." Is it Germany?
It is Germany.
Nice.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Deutsch.
Sprechen die Shorts.
Is Deutsch the language that I speak?
Deutsch?
Yeah,
Yes.
Deutsch.
Yeah. Tone, for your monster category and your question for which I'll need an answer. What liquid in Signs from 2002 turns out to be instrumental in defeating the alien invaders? Water. Sugar. Yep, it is indeed water.
H2O.
Oh, we had a science question last week, too. The tinfoil hats.
Oh, they said science. I was like, all right.
Science
It's water.
rules.
Anyway, cool. So Anthony and I are tied, and we're on the board, and John's sitting at 0, and we're going to move on to the next set, which is...
Gore/disturbing.
John, which of the following is not a monster in the underground bestiary in Cabin in the Woods from 2012?
Bestiary is illegal, John. Be careful with what you say.
Is it a zombie, a ninja, a unicorn, or a merman? Pop.
I'm not a merboy, Pop. I'm a merman.
Who
are you?
I really want to know.
I really want an answer to this question.
Zombies for sure there. Unicorn, I'm pretty sure, is also there.
So then your last two choices. Not saying you're right. Not saying you're wrong. The last two are
A merman and ninja.
and merman.
I think there is a mermaid.
Make sure you get your pronouns right, John.
I'm gonna say there isn't a ninja.
Ninja is the correct answer.
All right.
Nice job.
Yeah, because the merman's the one that eventually gets, what's his face from Get Out?
Yeah,
Bradley Whitford.
Brad Bradley.
Brad Bradley.
Good old Brad Bradley. Stickly.
Would have voted for Obama a third time, Whitford.
Oh, shit. Anthony, who directed the Grindhouse fake trailer for Don't?
I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Damn.
That I don't know.
Yeah, I have.
No, I really don't know.
Trying to think of who could have possibly done, like, who's friends with Rodriguez and Tarantino.
If you got feet, you're a friend of Tarantino's. You know what I mean?
True that.
Dude, you have feet.
Look at those feet right there.
Oh, shit.
Put those grippers away.
Get Tarantino on the phone. I have a great idea for his
Here we
next
go.
film.
Get Quentin on the phone.
I'm just going to say it was... Sam Raimi.
Ooh, it was the darling from across the pond, Edgar Wright.
Oh, really?
No way. Did you know that before reading this?
Nope.
I would have never guessed that.
I think I've read that somewhere, but yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that either.
I've never seen those fake trailers because I've only watched those movies separately.
Yeah.
I watched it in 2007 at like fucking 1 o'clock in the morning. So that's as all I remember aside from rewatching the Eli Roth Thanksgiving trailer.
Well, I guess I was Edgar wrong on that one, wasn't I? Tone, your question. I'm going to need an answer. Which character is not a protege of Jigsaw in the Saw series from 2004 to 2017? So not including Spiral.
Okay.
Spiral.
Amanda Young, Mark Hoffman, Logan Nelson, or Peter Strahm.
Fuck.
Which is not a protege. Amanda Young,
Okay.
Mark Hoffman,
I know that she is.
Logan Nelson, or Peter Strahm.
Mark, Logan, and Peter are the other ones.
Yeah, it's Peter, Paul, George, Ringo. So yeah, Amanda, Mark, Logan, or Peter. Which one is not a protege?
I'm having a hard time remembering who those characters are.
I only remember 2 of them.
Well, Tone, you can do this.
And I've
Tone.
seen this franchise multiple times. Real strong characters in the Saw franchise.
That's Strom. Sorry.
I'll say Logan.
Ooh, that was Peter Strahm.
I don't know who they are.
Yeah, I would have had just as much luck on that as you.
If you showed me like a picture and told me like which one isn't, then I probably could have gotten it. Because she is, and then the detective is the Donnie Wahlberg character. Spoilers. And then
Spoilers.
Carrie.
Yeah.
Ellis is.
Yeah, Carrie Elwes is.
But I
and
don't
then-
know if that's any of their characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, because Carrie Elwes is
not
Dr. Gordon, so he's on the list.
Was Donnie Wahlberg one? One of the detectives was. at
Donnie
some
Wahlberg
point.
comes back, but I don't think he's working for Jigsaw. He comes back like after he gets
He comes back
captured in Saw
to
2.
promote his burger joint.
he's like laying there dying. He's like, it's a tasty ass treat right here.
That's just like literally just a gag from It's Always Sunny.
Really?
Where they're like playing extras at a movie that's being filmed, and Frank has like sausages.
Pocket sausages, yeah.
And he's just like,
He's supposed to be playing dead, and he's just like,
I love a good pocket sausage.
Donnie, you served me an underdone burger at your establishment. Now you must eat your own underdone flesh to experience my pain.
Well, we're all tied.
yeah.
Moving into round 3, which is
Psychological.
God. That was a crazy build-up there. John, Buried from 2010, is set in what Middle Eastern country? Iraq, Afghanistan,
I wasn't expecting options.
or Syria?
Aren't you glad you got options?
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't say banana.
yeah, to all of those things. I'm going to say that it is Afghanistan.
The correct answer is Iraq.
Ah, bummer.
Iraq.
Anthony, for your psychological question, in Pet Sematary from 1989.
The vertigo shot on me when he says that.
In Pet Sematary from 1989, what type of vehicle hits Gage Creed on the highway near the family home?
Gage.
Gage-erade.
I'm gonna say a semi/18-wheeler semi truck.
So I'm 100% going to give it to you because it kept it super vague, and it says literally just a truck.
A truck. Okay. Well, I'm gonna say that's a 1.5 for me for being a little bit more specific.
Not if it was a pickup truck.
That's true. Tone, your question, for which I'm going to need that A, boy.
Buddy, I'm going to try my best.
At the 75th Golden Globe Awards, Get Out from 2017 was nominated for Best Motion Picture in what category?
Golden Globes?
Come on, baby. I know this one.
I'm trying to remember what they are because there's drama, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like comedy. Is it comedy musical?
Yeah, comedy musical.
Yeah.
Best musical or comedy.
Right. And I think that was a weird win. And then The Martian also, I think, won.
Got
in that
best
category.
musical comedy, yeah.
That makes a little more sense. The Martian
True.
is like a comedy, roughly.
Well, and I think Get Out is a dark comedy, but I don't think it belongs in that category. It's just, the insistence that horror movies don't get awarded anything.
Sweet. So we're tied at 2.
Think so.
Yeah.
And John's sitting at 1, and we're moving into category 4.
Paranormal.
John, what actress portrayed Renee Lambert in Insidious from 2010?
Renee Lambert. Shoot. Okay, so we have Lynn Shay, and that's not who Erica Lambert is. So it's is it Rose Byrne?
That is correct. Rose Byrne. Just the one.
It wasn't multiple Rose Byrnes in the role of
But we'll give it to you.
multiplicity shit.
Anthony in Poltergeist, or Poltergeist, as we say here on the show.
As you say on the show.
1982. Hey, everyone in this room has at least once said Poltergeist. From 1982, on what is the housing community Kesta Verde built?
It's on a graveyard. It's on a burial ground, an Indian burial ground.
You've said all of the things that aren't this word, but they all mean the same. It's on a cemetery.
On a cemetery, yeah. Yeah, because he's like, you moved the headstones, but you didn't move the bodies. You son of a bitch. Tone, your cue, and I need that A.
He's gonna get that A.
The Ring.
Gonna get a D if he just plays cards right.
Flashback to our Ringu episode. In The Ring from 2002, how many days after watching the sinister videotape does one meet their doom? And this is a tough one because it's not like a character calls and just directly says it over the phone at any point.
Several times at that.
And it's not like it's one of the most recognizable lines from the movie or anything like that. So
7.
Go for it.
7.
Ooh, yeah, it was 7 days. You got it.
I heard, and I don't remember this, but apparently there was a viral campaign or whatever the fuck you want to call it when the second one was coming out, that there was a number that you can put in your friend's number and then send them a link, and it would be the trailer for the new movie, and it would be like this weird video, and then after the video, like it would know like when you click the link, and so it would call you. And it was like 7 days.
That's so
And I was like,
fucking cool.
Yeah, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, what the fuck? Like, I wish I could do that now.
Like, just that would be enough to get me in the seat, like,
Yeah.
to watch that movie, even if I knew it wasn't going to be a good Ring movie. If a new one came out and was like, yep, and now it's going to give you a spooky call, I'd be like, I'm down.
If I would have known that, I would have been sending that out.
I mean, in reality, the call would have gotten forwarded to my voicemail. I never would have heard it, but
Oh, unknown caller. Sick. Delete.
yeah. Bye, spooky bitch.
You each have 3. I got 2.
Yep, that is correct, John. Hey, let me do my job, okay? All right, we have 3, and you have...
That's funny because last week you were like, John, what's the score? John, what's the score?
Every week I'm like, John, what's the score?
And the next category is killer.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you helping me out. John, what actor portrayed Reverend Harry Powell in The Night of the Hunter? Has anyone seen Night of the Hunter?
I have. No, I haven't.
Have
I?
That might need to go on our trivia misses.
It might already be there.
Okay.
I did watch Night of the Hunter. I can just check my letterbox right now and tell you if there's stars on it. I watched it.
Oh, who played the Reverend? Like Zoink Scoob.
Buddy, I don't even know if you've heard this name before, so I don't know how much of your time I would waste.
Oh, yeah. Duh. Gave this movie 5 fucking stars. How did I forget?
I think that leads credence to maybe Quiet Place 2 is not just a forgettable movie.
No, it's just because Night of the Hunter is a very to me it's a
Could be
vague
anything.
title. Yeah, it could have been one of many movies I watched. But yeah.
Many night of movies. I'm gonna say
there's a few out there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say because he's been a reverend in other horror movies. I'm gonna say Michael Parks.
That is incorrect. It is Robert Mitchum.
Mitchum. Damn near killed him. Anthony, who fucking directed Scream from 1996?
Wes Craven.
Yes, it is Wes Craven.
Nice. You got the harder card this week, bud.
Oh yeah, you're gonna be real pissed when you hear his question too, because you're getting softies. Your question in the killer category, for which I will need an A. In The Silence of the Lambs from 1991, what kind of beans does Hannibal Lecter say he ate the liver of a census takeaway?
Fava beans.
They were fava beans.
Farva beans.
And a nice Chianti.
Bean
Brett-
Ramrod.
Brett Farva beans.
Woo! Yeah, that was an easy one. All right. So Anthony and I tied at 4.
Four. 4.
4. And John, you still got 2, bud? Tough break. We're going to move into the final category here, which I believe is international.
Yes.
All right. This one, I think you might got.
Mike could.
During what war does The Devil's Backbone from 2001 take place?
I believe it's the Spanish Civil War.
That is correct. Hey, finish it
hey.
off with 3.
Hey, I'll take international points.
Yeah, that's usually my weakest category.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not worth as much as American points. The exchange rate isn't quite equal.
So you got 2.75 points.
Anthony, an audition from 1999. What is the audition process meant to prevent Aoma, or meant to help Aoma find?
All I can think of is a rope, a sack. I'm pretty sure it's to find a wife.
Mm-hmm.
A waifu?
Yes, a wife.
Okay.
Correct answer.
Spoiler alert: things don't go quite according to plan in that movie.
Because there is a rope, a rustling sack,
and a phone or something, or needles. I think
it's needles.
Yeah. Tone. The title may give it away, but no, I actually don't know if it does. Your question for which I need an answer. In A Tale of Two Sisters from 2003, what is the relationship between Unju and Sue Me? Sue me? I'll sue you, motherfucker.
Well, I mean, immediately I want to say sisters, but I don't.
Maybe I psychologically
Maybe you
manipulated
did, yeah.
you. Yeah.
I think you did manipulate me.
Did you just end that whatever that gibberish was in Little Amy?
Yeah, was that one of their names?
Yeah, he was.
Little Amy and Little Gregory.
He was speaking Jarman or whatever.
That's like a GPS. I don't know, sisters.
They are stepmother and stepdaughter.
Yeah, Sue Me is one of the sisters, and then the other one is not. But their name, I think the sisters are their names are similar.
Sue Me and Sue Young.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because-
that's right. And he had that question the other, and that's why I didn't want to say sisters, but I was kind of over it.
So what does that mean?
Congratulations,
You
sir.
won.
Woo! Damn, 3 in a row.
What was that? Oh, you did. Congratulations.
Not a sweep this week though. That one was tougher. I think because we had a weird combination of crazy easy questions and crazy difficult questions.
I wish some of those crazy easy questions came my way.
At least you got some multiple choices.
Yeah, this is very true. This is very true.
Ow.
Oh,
Move on. That's it. That's your wrap it up for trip. Wait, take a short break.
got the feed.
A little cry break. And then we'll be right back with our discussion on Jack the Ripper.
Jack the Ripper.
Rip it up. Rip it up.
Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/porcelainpeak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more. Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/porcelainpeak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more.
Hey, you want to see something really scary?
Welcome back. We're going to go ahead and jump into our discussion on Jack the Ripper. If you're not familiar with this for some reason, this does get pretty graphic, and we're going to probably dive into these murders and how they took place. So it's kind of your warning there. And Anthony, you wanted to get started with some background, so we'll go ahead and jump off from there.
Yeah, so kind of different from the other stories that we've talked about. This one does not have a specific historical figure that we can go into the history and details on. So
It's funny that you bring that up, because I was like, oh, I'm going to dive into this and get really nitty-gritty. And I was like, biography on Jack the Ripper. And then I was like, why is there no, like, what was his life like as a kid? And for like 3 minutes, I was like, oh, yeah, idiot, because they don't know who it is.
Yeah, because we've been so into this. Like, once you peel back the myth, there's the real man at the center of it. And it's like, no, nobody fucking knows who this was.
So ogres have layers, onions have layers. Jack the Ripper has
no layers.
no layers.
Yeah. So I'm going to take you back to a little time period called the 19th century. That's the 1800s if you're nasty, if you're squirrely.
The 18 years.
Yeah. So in Britain, there was an influx of immigrants at the time. Irish immigrants had swelled into the major cities in the East End of London from 1882 and onward. Jewish refugees had been fleeing from pogroms in Russia. They've been rushing to get out of there, if you will. And other areas of Eastern Europe had also emigrated to Britain. So at this point, the place was packed. They were like sardines, bro. The parish of Whitechapel in the East End became increasingly overcrowded, and the population was approximately 80,000 inhabitants by 1888, which is pretty insane to think about for a pretty small location. So because of that, this overcrowding, work and housing conditions became awful, and a significant portion of the population became underclass and destitute.
Yeah, and a lot of crime took place in this area specifically.
Yeah, so 55, I thought this was crazy, 55% of children born in the East End died before they were 5 years old. Robbery, violence, and alcohol dependency were commonplace.
Yeah, I read that. It was like every corner was a bar, and next to every bar was a brothel.
A brothel, yeah. And most of these people were like, yeah, I'm just going to drink to get away from how terrible it is to be here, and how poor I am, and how terrible my job is. And
it's like one indulgence right into the next.
Yeah, and because of this widespread poverty, a lot of women turned to prostitution to get by on a day-to-day basis. In October 1888, London's Metropolitan Police Service estimated that there were 62 brothels and 1,200 women working as prostitutes in Whitechapel, with approximately 8,500 people residing in the 233 common lodging houses within Whitechapel. So I've seen some pictures of what these looked like, and these common lodging houses a lot of the time would just be a bench with a rope that you could lean on, and you could pay like 2 pence to lean against a rope for the night.
Jesus.
There were other places where they would literally just basically make topless caskets sat next to each other. They were like I think they were called coffin houses, and you could go in and just have the floor with like a little casket around you to lay on, because people just wanted to get out of the cold, and they couldn't afford to get a room at a halfway decent place. So most of these women spent their time getting drunk, prostituting, and then crashing in these terrible lodging houses. The nightly price for a single bed was 4 pence, which most of these women couldn't afford, and the cost of sleeping on a lean-to or hangover, which again was just sort of like a rope you could lean across, was 2 pence. The economic problems in Whitechapel were accompanied by rising social tensions. Between 1886 and 1889, frequent demonstrations led to police intervention and public unrest, such as Bloody Sunday.
It was a lot against the Jews, right?
Yeah, anti-Semitism, crime, nativism, racism, social disturbance,
is that
and severe
wrong to say the Jews?
What?
The way that it's been described to me is that it all really depends on your inflection and what you mean by it, because they refer to themselves as the Jews. The Jews are just a type of people, but it's really in the inflection and like if there's vitriol in your voice, that's when you've crossed the line. So if you are a person who hates Jews.
Okay.
Saying Jews is basically a slur. But if you're a person who is just recognizing that the Jews are a group of people, then it's not a big deal.
Okay, so that's good if we say the Jews now.
Yes.
Okay. So a lot. Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I don't want to offend anybody or be offensive in any way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing that. I'm glad that because I've always kind of wondered about that too. And yeah, I do think it comes down to your
Context.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of racism, social disturbance, deprivation. So all of Whitechapel and the East End became kind of seen as a den of immorality, and such perceptions were, of course, strengthened in the autumn of 1888 when a series of vicious murders attributed to Jack the Ripper gained unprecedented coverage in the media. 11 separate murders stretching from April of 1888 to February of 91 were included in a Metropolitan Police investigation known collectively as the Whitechapel Murders. And Tone, you wanted to go a little bit into where these murders fall within the Jack the Ripper, the confirmed or supposed Jack the Ripper killings, and which ones fall outside of that, because there's a lot of disagreement around this about how many victims Jack the Ripper actually had.
Yeah, so there are 5, the canonical 5, which we're going to get into here in a little bit, and those all have a very similar MO to them. The way that they were killed and how they were killed.
And what was done after they died.
Right, all super similar. But before that, there were 2 women. Emma Smith was one who was attacked. She was maybe a first victim, but again, she's not in part of this 5. She was attacked by 3 men, so that leaves people to believe that it was more gang-related than it was Jack
she said
the Ripper.
One of them was a teenager, and there was a lot of gang violence happening in the area at the time. She did end up passing away, but it wasn't until the next day. She actually, because there was a blunt object forced inside of her by whoever did attack her, she developed an infection and ended up dying the next day, but not really the MO of the future Ripper killings that we've seen.
Right, and especially as we go into it, we'll see that it does seem like he or she was working alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one that took place before our first canonical victim was Martha Tambram, who was stabbed 39 times, which, again, isn't the exact way that the Ripper was killing. But, I mean, if you've seen any of these like procedural cop shows, sometimes killers start a certain way and then it gets more and more and more violent until they find exactly the way that they want to. So this one, again, not super believed to be part of Jack the Ripper's killing spree, but could be.
There are also a pair of ones that I found in my research as well. Annie Millwood was listed as a potential early victim as well. And I believe that she was attacked. Not a lot of the attack lined up with what ended up becoming the full MO, but this would have been the earliest attack. Mm-hmm. And then she ended up passing away in the hospital after the attack, but not due to anything from complications from the attack. And then there was
from being alive in London in 1888.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then there was also Ada Wilson, whose entire MO lines up with down to throat slashing and all these different the places that she was stabbed and attacked at, all lined up with his MO, but she survived.
Jesus.
Yeah, so she gave an account of what she said the person looked like, and most of the account was that they were just kind of a regular looking guy.
Dude, yeah.
But she did end up surviving. These were all things that took place in early 1888. Which took place before where we get to that canonical 5 group.
Yeah, and I think what you brought up about this is just kind of what it was like living in London at this time, that was what stuck out to me here, and part of why I think it makes identifying a specific person as Jack the Ripper and then identifying which of these victims were for real Jack the Ripper killings so difficult is because so many people were being brutally murdered. There are things which I'll talk about later about why specifically the Jack the Ripper case became the most notorious one and became the most well-known one, but murder was rampant, and especially with women of the night being easy targets and being accompanied by men who would sometimes turn violent after being sexual.
And forensic science wasn't what it is now.
Yeah, I guess this was
Perps weren't jizzing on everything.
Yeah, it wasn't until 10 years after the Ripper cases that the first like fingerprints being used in forensics became a thing, and even then it was very rudimentary. But yeah, they didn't have DNA testing. They weren't able to trace like little bits of fluids and blood and things like that. So they really just had to go off of eyewitnesses, and as we'll find out with a lot of these, the eyewitnesses had crazy contradictory things to say. But there are the canonical 5 victims.
Well, let's go to the end first. Let's go to the Thames torso murders that are also maybe Jack, but not necessarily.
Thames is the pronunciation.
Thames, sorry. What did I say? Thames? The Thames. This was, again, a series of murders that took place in 88 and 89. Some believe it could be Jack because, again, it could be an escalation of slashing and kind of dissecting where just torsos were found.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of that other 11 that may have been linked to Jack. But again, this is after the canonical 5 and not necessarily connected.
Yeah, and I think in the 130 years or whatever it's been since the murders, there has been enough scholarly analysis to narrow it down at least to these 5, but there are different schools of thought where some people believe only 3 of these canonical 5 are 100% for sure Ripper victims. There are some schools that combine the first 2 and these 5 to be, the canonical 7. There are some people who want to include all, 11, 12 murders. So it really just depends on what you're using to connect them. And it seems like the brutality of the murders and the specific places where they were mutilated ends up being the main connector between, and the location too. Like most of these canonical 5 happened within like a mile of each other.
And it was also the fact that they took place over the course of like 2 months. I mean, so it was more in line with like a spree killing than it was with like what would be our modern like serial killer MO, where like you have somebody like the Zodiac who killed for years. Kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think that's where people may not realize, because the Jack the Ripper killing spree is so notorious and such a well-known thing. I think a lot of people would assume that he must have been terrorizing London for like years.
Until I was doing research, I was like, there's only 5 victims. I mean, I shouldn't say only 5, but I thought it was larger.
Yeah.
And I thought it was longer spread.
And I think that's part of what makes this such an interesting case, is that people have absolutely no idea why there would be these 5 and then no more after that. If these are the only 5, why did it not continue after that? And there's some theories as to why that was the case. But
I like you said too, people were killing, and even some of the suspects that I have on my list were convicted serial killers.
Yeah,
obviously not that terminology, but they had killed several other people. So it's like he said, it's happening a lot.
Yeah, it's not like today. Well, I mean, there's a lot of violence today, but with serial killers, it's like when a serial killer pops up now, it's so out of the ordinary to see something like that I feel like that potentially makes the job easier. And obviously, there's all the advancements in forensics and all that. But you got to think at this time, they were trying to find a killer in a sea of killers, basically. Just trying to find out which one specifically did these. But the 5 canonical Ripper victims are Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. On Friday the 31st of August in 1888, the body of Mary Ann Nichols was discovered at 3:40 a.m. in Bucks Row, Whitechapel. Her throat had been severed by 2 deep cuts that were so deep that it was down to her vertebrae.
Yeah, and I heard the guy, Charles Cross, came across it. Skirt was up, and he was like, I don't know what I should do about this. Nicely put her skirt down, but then didn't immediately go to the police.
Yeah, I believe it was him and a man named Robert Paul, and his name was Robert Paul, son. And they ran into her. Robert Paul wasn't convinced that she was dead. He just thought that maybe she was really still breathing, and it was still very dark in the streets. So they were like, yeah, we'll just put her skirt down, and they were both in a hurry to get to work. So they took off to go to work and just figured, we'll catch a policeman on the way, and a different policeman ended up crossing her, where she was, and discovered the body, and that's how she ended up being discovered. But
pretty crazy.
Yeah, so she had the classic Ripper cuts to her throat, which became a signature of the slangs. Also, another signature was that her genitalia had been mutilated. She had been stabbed twice in her vagina. The lower part of her abdomen was ripped open with a deep, jagged wound, causing her bowels to spill out. Several other incisions had been inflicted to both sides of her abdomen, all caused by the same knife. And each of these wounds had been inflicted by a downward thrusting manner.
Well, and they also, the surgical quality of the cuts that took place are one of the calling cards of the Ripper, and just the theory that the Ripper could have been like some form of medical professional.
But even that, like pretty much everything else in this case is debated, because there were other people who said also that it wasn't as impressive as it was made out to be. But we'll talk a little bit about that, I think.
Yeah, another crazy thing about this one is that when the police and whoever got there, they determined that she was probably killed about 30 minutes before her body was discovered. So that means that if that's true, that the Ripper was probably in the vicinity at this time.
Yeah, and that happens with a couple of these where it turned out that the woman was in one of these cases murdered outside of the potentially open window of a policeman's apartment. And there was also another policeman who would patrol the building right next door to where she was killed and would hear the footsteps of other cops patrolling and like knew all the sounds of the area, and nobody heard a single thing. And this woman was able to be killed and mutilated without anybody hearing anything. And I think that obviously also adds to the Jack the Ripper mystique of how was this guy? Because in a lot of these cases, they found out this person was murdered probably only a half hour to an hour before their body was discovered. So he was in and out quick, but for the amount of work he put into these bodies, he really had to get in there and get it done, as grotesque as that is to say.
Another part of, I think, his mystique and problems that the police eventually have with this case is the media presence and how involved they were. And we're going to get some information later about their involvement with some of these letters that he sent, potentially, right? Because everything is debated, like you said.
Yeah.
But at this point, the media claimed it was a Jewish man named John Pizer.
Yeah.
And they called him the Leather Apron.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, like, I don't want to say any of this is cool, but that's a really lame name.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
And he was arrested, but then
he had alibis.
And then he eventually sued. Because he was like, hey, that's libel, man.
Yeah,
and,
so I
he
guess...
won.
Yeah, I mean, he was a shoemaker, I guess, and the leather apron thing really just came from he wore a leather apron while he was making shoes. And
he did have a prior stabbing charge, so that kind of played into it.
Yeah, and there were some whisperings within the circle of prostitutes in the area that somebody called Leather Apron had been harassing them, and so it just became kind of the thing that the media glommed onto initially. Right. So before becoming Jack the Ripper, the killer was known as Leather Apron for a while. And it ended up being this man who on one instance, I think, was out of the area, and in another instance was watching a fire on the London docks and talking to a police officer like while the murder was supposed to have been happening. So,
and was a Jewish immigrant, which played into the kind of how society was at the time, especially in that area.
Yeah.
So she was the 31st. And then
1 week later,
just like a week. Yeah, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah,
dude.
September 1888, the body of Annie Chapman was discovered at 6 a.m. near the steps of a doorway of the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street in Spitalfields.
And then we start to see his MO develop a little bit here, and then parts of this murder continue with at least the next two victims.
Yeah, so like you were saying earlier, he seems to have kind of, again, assuming these murders are connected, he seems to have kind of ramped up in his brutality as he went along to really the masterpiece of grotesqueness that the last one ends up being. But
do you think, because the way you said that, do you think that there's a chance that these 5 aren't even the same person? Do you think that there's a possibility?
After doing all this research and realizing that literally every time you would start to go down a road of this is a possibility, there would be some reason why it didn't make sense for it to be a possibility. And so I really think anything is possible. I really think that there is a chance that none of these could have been connected by the same person. But I mean, I think when you get down to like what I'll be describing here, the throat slitting and the bowels and things like, and the organ removal, that all seems like the same person. I would say that to me that lines up directly with how we see modern serial killers in their MOs.
Yeah, where it develops. It's not something where like if we are to go back to the previous 3 or 4 individuals who are claimed to have potentially been attacked by Jack before this point, it's a clear escalation path where we have people who survived the attacks, and then we made sure that we were, fully, taking their life from them before we left the scene, and that we, potentially didn't set ourselves up in a great time window where we had time separated, or we were out kind of in the public eye and could have been spotted by people. Like the previous case.
You're saying like maybe you had something to do with this, John. Are you trying to admit to being John the Ripper?
Oh, no.
John the Ass Ripper?
Maybe.
But if you, there was like a comedy of errors that took place in the first actual like canonical case that prevented this person from being caught in the very first instance. Like they were very close to like a night watchman's stand, but apparently that night watchman had been on record as saying that they occasionally dozed off from time to time during their night watch, which is definitely what you want from a night watchman that's supposed to be keeping everybody safe. And also took place across the street from this like butcher shop essentially, and there were 3 butchers who were on duty at the time who were doing what butchers do, who all claimed that they saw nothing. And so we did this perfect comedy of errors that prevented them from being caught this time. But as we get further into it, there's less stopping what's taking place.
Yeah, and I think that ties into why people are pretty convinced that whoever Jack the Ripper was, they must have been somebody who knew the streets of Whitechapel like the back of their hand. So most people are convinced that it would have had to be a Whitechapel resident and not somebody coming in from outside, because of the fact that he was able to escape in such short notice when almost being caught many times throughout this spree of killings, was able to slide down back alleys, sneak around without being noticed by anybody. This person would had to have known all of these streets and back alleys super, super well in order to navigate and get around as effectively without being caught. But yeah, so very similarly to the Nichols death, in Chapman's case, her throat had been severed by 2 deep cuts once again. Her abdomen had been cut entirely open, with a section of the flesh from her stomach being placed on her left shoulder and another section of skin and flesh, plus her small intestines, being removed and placed above her right shoulder. Chapman's autopsy also revealed that her uterus and sections of her bladder and vagina had been removed.
And I think this is the first instance when the coroner was like, I think it's a long, thin surgical type blade.
Has to be somebody that knows anatomy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's the side that I kind of fall on too, because there are some dissenting opinions from other experts who say actually the attacks were too brutal and the cuts were too jagged to really be somebody who was educated. There also were a large majority of people who were convinced that no Englishman could have committed these crimes, because there was a lot of racism going on at the time. And so a lot of people just straight up were like, it had to have been a Jewish person, it had to have been an Irish person, it had to have been an immigrant, because there's no way that a respectable English person, despite the fact that you could clearly see how terrible the conditions in Whitechapel were and how people weren't living respectable English lives because they couldn't.
And when we eventually get a loose description of what potentially Jack looked like, it is someone who they described as completely normal looking. Like he was, I think, like 5'5", 5'7".
Yeah, kind of stocky.
And was just like a normal looking dude. Had a hat and a jacket. What you think of when you think of like Victorian Englishmen.
Yeah, it just goes to show that when it comes to like accounts from times like this, I mean, you have to take most of it with a grain of salt. Yeah. Even when it comes to the accounts of the police officers who took down information. Or, because we don't have photographs, we don't have DNA, we don't have all of the trimmings and trappings of modern crime scene investigation.
We do have, John, letters.
We got some letters.
We just got a letter. We just got a letter.
It was around this time that the police started getting a ton of letters. Some of them were about how to help catch Jack. Some of them were claiming to be him. There was one that was opening with "Dear Boss."
Yeah, so
that said he was going to clip some ears off.
The 3 most reputable letters are the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jack,
and that first one, the Dear Boss one, letter, was signed Jack the Ripper, and that's where we get that moniker from.
Yeah, so this is also, I think, another reason why the Jack the Ripper case has become so infamous, is that this is very early, if not one of the first examples of a killer giving themselves a moniker and then the media picking it up. And now that's become a trend with most serial killers, that they have some sort of moniker. I mean, I joked earlier about there being a connection between the Zodiac and Jack the Ripper, but the connection being that they both gave themselves their names in letters.
That was my immediate thought when I came across that in the research. I was like, oh, just like the Zodiac.
Yeah, assuming, again, that this is the actual killer writing these letters. So
yeah, it lists here at the bottom of the letter, it says, "Don't mind me giving the trade name. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off of my hands. Curse it. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha."
Wow. Yeah, so this letter, they at first considered a hoax,
Yep.
but because the letter did mention taking an ear off of a victim, and then the next murder that we're going to talk about had a clipped ear.
Yes.
There's a little bit more credence to the idea that this might have been the actual killer.
A little bit longer apart. This one is on the 30th now, so from the 8th to the 30th, so 22 days versus the 7. Mm-hmm. And we get a double.
Yep.
Yeah, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes.
Yeah, so Elizabeth Stride, also known as Long Liz, she had her throat cut.
Everybody's got fucking nicknames. You got Jack the Ripper, Long Liz.
Yeah, that's London town for you, baby.
Well, I would assume that, because I did see that most of these women had aliases, I would assume that when they're doing work at night, they probably don't want to use their actual names, so they all had
Oh, that's just
monikers
old
and
Long Liz
nicknames.
down over there on the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some believe that she wasn't a Ripper victim. I don't know if you came across that. But
Yeah.
she also had her throat cut, but she was not mutilated like the others were, possibly because this man, Israel Schwartz, came across and saw that a man was being assaulted around 12:45 that morning.
Yeah, so most people who link these two murders as both being canonical Ripper murders say that, yes, Elizabeth Stride ended up not being as heavily mutilated because the Ripper was interrupted, because somebody had seen him. This man says that at one point, he was walking down the road, saw a man assaulting Elizabeth Stride, like at the entryway to an alley. He thought that it was just a married couple fighting, so he crossed the street. He saw a man smoking a pipe. Mm-hmm. At one point, the man assaulting the woman called out something, including the word Lipsky. So a lot of people had the theory... Could have been a
racist slur at the time.
Yeah, so a lot of people at first had the theory that Lipsky was the name of the man with the pipe, and that potentially that was an accomplice of Jack the Ripper. And he was calling out to his accomplice, because then the supposed accomplice, the man with the pipe, ended up following, was it Schwartz, down the road for a while and then taking a different direction. But yeah, Aberline, the detective heading the case, he said that actually Lipsky was more of a Jewish derogatory term, and so they think because Schwartz was Jewish, he's just being a dick. Yeah, the guy was just calling him a slur.
And apparently the media really ridiculed Schwartz.
Yeah, they called him like a hen-hearted. Yeah,
because he didn't do anything. Like, oh, you coward! I was like, God, the media has just always been dicks.
Yeah, and it's like, dude, if the streets were as rough as it sounds like they were here, I wouldn't be getting involved with that shit either. But
so then later that morning, the next victim is Catherine, aka Kate Eddowes. She was walking around after some time in jail because she was drunk.
To me, this was one of the more tragic one. I mean, they're all terrible, but this was tragic because she had been in a jail cell for most of the night, and at like 1 a.m, she was let go. And if she had just, it's one of those, if only she had just been kept in the cell all night, then potentially she wouldn't have been got.
So she, again, throat cut, face mutilated, intestines on the shoulder, removed a kidney, and then
that kidney was later sent to the police.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
And then part of the uterus was removed. Yeah, so I heard that too, and we'll get into it when we get to that part, but then I also heard that could have been a prank, which kind of leads to how weird this time.
Yeah, so going back to the letters a little bit, we talked about the Dear Boss letter. One that was in a similar styling and they're pretty sure is from the same person is the Saucy Jackie postcard. Mm-hmm. This was postmarked October 1st of 1888.
So this came in that same morning.
Yeah.
Like just later.
And this one refers to committing a double event this time, so that they believe that potentially this was the killer hinting to killing 2 women in the same morning. Although if you think that Jack was interrupted and that's why he killed 2 women. It doesn't really make sense that he would have referred to it, and
We still killed them.
yeah.
And
Because it says here that it's been argued that the postcard was posted before the murders were publicized, making it unlikely that a prank would have been committed. However, it was actually postmarked more than 24 hours after the killings had occurred, long after details of the murders were known to journalists. So this is where the theory about
that's what I heard. Yeah,
it being
that
journalists.
there was an idea of 2 different journalists because they did have access to details that the public wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
And so some believe that it was one of them because they wanted to keep the media frenzy going.
Yeah, and they
Good for sales.
and the and journalists were upset that the police were not sharing as much information as they would like with them. So it seems, at least a theory, is that some of these journalists took it upon themselves to make up stories and make up sensational things about Jack the Ripper to help, keep this. Unfortunately, news makes money off of blood. So,
But then the kidney one that John was talking about came from the From Hell letter.
which is
that
a
was
completely different styling.
Sent to George Lusk, who was the leader of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, which to me, reading this, I was like, that's so crazy that there was like a vigilante group of people.
Well, I mean, at this point,
They're like a
had
neighborhood
been,
watch.
I mean, at this point, there had been several killings, and obviously, it seems like there was more going on aside from just these specific killings and attacks. Because Whitechapel just seemed like a fucked up place.
Yeah,
So at that
people.
point, when do you
it's
not
like the
just
Stockton of London?
Yeah, it's like when do you to just stop believing that the police are going to be in your best interest and not press forward and try to well, I could do that better.
Yeah, people were very upset with the lack of progress. Everybody was obviously very afraid of what was going on.
I was wondering if this is kind of where the Conan Doyle idea of like Scotland Yard and everybody being kind of bumbling fools came from. Because of maybe not this specifically, but this idea where the police aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Because Sherlock seems to run circles around all of them in every instance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that at least I don't know, when did Sherlock come out in relation to
I don't know.
Jack
Off the
the
top of my
Ripper,
head,
but-
I'd have to look.
yeah, there was that, and then also at some point, I think it was in the New York Times, the American police were saying, like, calling the British police like a bunch of fucking idiots, basically, like in the newspaper. Like the police were getting shit from literally everybody, the press, the public, and people from the United States saying like, you guys are really fucking up. But it's like these kills were happening so quickly together, and there's pretty much no evidence.
And they're getting a ton of letters that could, like, will they, won't they? You know what I mean? Like, these could be hints, and they could also be complete bullshit.
Yeah, so at least with the From Hell letter, which I think ends up being the most famous one, this one plays a bit more like those Zodiac killer type letters. It's a little bit more confusing, lots of misspellings. And yeah, came with the part of the kidney. The kidney was examined by Dr. Thomas Openshaw of the London Hospital, and he determined that it was human, and according to him, from the left side of the body, which was the same side as the kidney that had been stolen from the victim. But he couldn't determine anything else about it.
Jack claimed to have eaten the rest.
Yeah.
Which is a little lectory.
Yeah, I love the signed "Catch Me When You Can."
Which is where they got that Leo movie from.
About Jack the Ripper, yeah.
But then I heard somewhere else that this could have been a prank from a medical student. And the video I was watching was just saying, like, I think that's kind of a sign of the times where people were like, yeah, it seems awful to us, but at the time, because it was just the norm of killers being everywhere, it was just like, yeah, let's prank them.
Yeah.
Let's do pranks on the fucking victims and, or, the surrounding area of these people.
Yeah, so it does come down to that there were people who claimed that it was a joke, and that that the kidney was then sent off to a doctor to confirm whether or not it was an animal kidney or a human kidney. So it was sent to a doctor named Dr. Openshaw, who then I believe also has a letter that was sent. But Dr. Openshaw, I do believe, confirms that it's a human kidney, but everybody says that Dr. Openshaw was kind of a crackpot. Mm-hmm. So that's where the continued, like, media back and forth bullshit is, like, affecting whether or not people under.
And that's
people
something else.
the case.
Wasn't all medical stuff before, like, the modern era all kind of crackpot?
Mm-hmm.
Like, looking back,
Yeah.
put
And
leeches on them.
Yeah, and I think, people build entire theories about who Jack the Ripper was based off of, like, literally one person's account of what they thought of a certain thing. And it's like all of these people had different opinions. So, of course, there's 10 million different theories. But a little piece of potential evidence that is also controversial as to whether it's actual evidence or not is that when Edo's body was found, there was also a bloodied apron that was found at the entrance to a tenement building in Golston Street, Whitechapel, and there was a chalk inscription on the wall directly above the apron that read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." This graffiti became known as the Golston Street graffiti. The message appeared to imply that a Jew or Jews in general were responsible for the murders, but it also could be a non-Jewish person trying to put the blame on Jewish people for the murders, or it could be completely unrelated. Yeah. So there are also people who say that graffiti was crazy common around the East End and everywhere, especially like racial graffiti, and so it could be a complete coincidence that the apron was found next to this graffiti. But
this is crazy because everything is like, yeah, this is it, but it could also not be it.
And on top of all of this, we talked about how the police are getting shit. Well, Police Commissioner Charles Warren feared that the graffiti would spark anti-Semitic riots, so he ordered it to be washed off the wall, and a lot of people were upset that potential evidence was washed away.
Oh, is that the killer's blood all over the crime scene? Gross. Clean it up. Now back to my hunch.
Pretty much, man. It could have been. That could easily have been. I mean, has anyone tossed around the theory that it could have been a cop?
I mean, I'm sure.
You know what I mean? Like, at this point,
literally every theory is... Could be.
Should we want to get to the last victim here?
Yeah. The fifth and final canonical murder and the most brutal. I've seen pictures
Mary
of this
Kelly.
one. It is... I don't know if you guys looked at any of the pictures.
I saw a little bit of it. That's really all I needed.
Yeah, unless you grew up on like Rotten.com, I would very highly recommend you don't go looking for these pictures because once you see them, they're hard to forget. But once we kind of go through what happened to Mary Jane Kelly, you'll understand why the pictures are so horrific.
Yeah, so she was killed in her home. They found her window was broken when... So
slight adjustment to the MO.
Right, and some believe like, hey, this is what Jack would do if he had more time because it was believed that he spent at least 2 hours with her.
Yeah, so it could be that the state of mutilation to the other victims was not as extensive because he didn't have enough time.
Yeah.
And he had the privacy at this point.
Thanks for keeping it British.
Yeah, I try. So basically what ended up happening here is the landlord had come to collect on some rent that they were due. He went up to the window, which had broken glass pane, peeked in behind a curtain, and saw the disemboweled body of Mary Jane Kelly. Like I said, she was discovered lying in bed in her single-room apartment where she lived at 13 Miller's Court off Dorset Street. Her face had been, quote, hacked beyond all recognition, with her throat severed down to the spine. When the men first walked into the room, they saw what they thought were just piles of, like, butchered meat around the room, and it turned out to be her organs and parts of her. She had her abdomen almost completely emptied of her organs. Her uterus, kidneys, and one breast had been placed beneath her head, and other viscera from her body placed behind her foot. The bed and sections of her abdomen and thighs were on the bedside table, and her heart was missing from the crime scene.
Holy cow.
She is generally considered to be the Ripper's
The Ripper!
Yeah, the Ripper's final victim, and it is assumed... It's assumed at this point, though it's a mystery like everything else, it's assumed that the crimes ended because the culprit, the Ripper, either died, was imprisoned, was institutionalized, or emigrated. But this is generally considered to be the last and most brutal of the 5 canonical murders.
Yeah, and eventually, and you mentioned him a little bit earlier, Scotland Yard took over, and Frederick Aberline became kind of the lead of this investigation. They were criticized a lot, partly because there was no reward, which was commonplace until a few years before these started happening when they didn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So they got criticized for it, but it's like, no, we're just not doing it because we stopped doing that already.
Yeah, and they eventually did offer an award. Yeah, it says that... unfortunately, the vast majority of the London police files related to the Jack the Ripper investigation were lost in the London Blitz when everything got burned down. Yeah, as a cover-up. There are crazier theories
One
here.
of the I was gonna say one of the theories.
Yeah,
is along
but
the
the
lines of
police
that.
did interview more than 2,000 people.
Excuse me.
More than 2,000 people. Upwards of 300 of them were investigated, and 80 people were detained. Following the murders of Stride and Eddowes, the commissioner of police did offer a £5,000 reward for the arrest of the Ripper. Main suspects for these crimes were butchers, slaughterers, surgeons, physicians. Because of the manner of the mutilations.
And we had talked about the medical connection. So there was a man named Thomas Bond who was asked about this. He was an expert, and he was like, "Let me write you an essay real quick." And this is kind of
The first,
thought of as
like,
the first
behavioral
criminal profile.
Yeah, criminal profile. Yeah.
So he disagreed with the medical background. He did think all 5 were the same person. And he believed that Jack had hypersexuality or nymphomania.
Yeah, and so while none of the victims were sexually assaulted, people do feel that the obvious like penetrating act of stabbing them, and obviously the focus on their sexual organs,
Yeah,
has
the
a lot-
removal of those is
is obviously
pretty
connected
telling.
to this like sexual sadism.
I have a list of kind of the main suspects, and then I have a little bit on kind of the wilder theories. So you want to talk about some of the bigger suspects?
Yeah, so basically I just wanted to mention real quick that most of the butchers and the slaughterers and the surgeons that were investigated did have alibis, so that didn't end up going anywhere. I guess 76 butchers and slaughterers were visited. Queen Victoria thought that the pattern of murders indicated that the culprit was a butcher or a cattle drover, because cattle boats would come in like on weekends, and one of the connections between the Ripper murders is that they were all perpetrated at night, they were all close to or on a weekend, and they were usually in the last week of a month. So that led people to believe that it must have been some sort of working or traveling man who was only in the area or had time off during the end of the month on weekends or on holidays. So that leads to why some of these suspects were considered.
Could be why they stopped too, because he quit going to that area, maybe.
Yeah, potentially.
All right. So one of the suspects I have, George Chapman, was one of the prime suspects. He was one of the convicted serial killers that I had mentioned earlier. He was hanged, and some people believe it was him, but his MO was poisonings. So he had poisoned 3 people. And so because I know we talked about things ramping up and sort of evolving, some believe this wasn't him just because the killing style is completely different.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about Leather Apron and discussed why his alibis kind of cleared him of all of that. Another man who was actually said to have been the discovered actual Jack the Ripper in a couple of the different police diaries and journals written after the fact was Aaron Kosminski. He was a Polish Jew who was admitted to Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum in 1891.
Had homicidal tendencies and hated women, especially the prostitutes.
Yeah, and some of the investigators said that one of the only men to say that he was able to positively identify the Ripper, who had seen him, or a witness, basically said it was Kosminski. And there's a theory that because Kosminski was protected by the Polish Jewish population in the area, they didn't want to turn him in as the killer. And then there's obviously the connection to him having gone into an asylum in 91 shortly after the murders stopped.
Right.
So a lot of people believe that's why.
This is the one that there was like a semen sample. I think that was just a few years ago,
2014,
right?
yeah. So DNA analysis tenuously linked Kosminski to a shawl said to have belonged to Catherine Eddowes, but experts including Professor Sir Alec Jeffreys, the inventor of genetic fingerprinting, dismissed the claims. For one thing, the DNA that was tested was mitochondrial DNA, which thousands of people can share. It's not. It's good for excluding suspects, but not for. So it's like, okay, you don't. Yeah, but it's not good for actually identifying a specific person.
It's more specific to like because I am a white person who has who is descendant of people from like the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. Other people who are also from that same area could have similar mitochondrial DNA, whereas actual like blood or sexual fluids would have different type of DNA that's more that could be narrowed down to down to your family, down to those sorts of specifics.
That makes sense. But I also heard that in the records of what was found with the victim,
There ain't
a shawl
no shawl
wasn't included. Yeah.
Yeah, so the story goes that one of the police officers here found the shawl and took it and then passed it down throughout his family. And then in modern day, whoever, his descendant was like, hey, but again, it's much more likely, in my opinion, that he just had this shawl and wanted to say that he was there, because in the reports, it's not even said that specific officer was at the scene. So it sounds like somebody who just invented a story so he would have some connection to the Jack the Ripper investigation and just handed the shawl down. So really, I don't think that there's much merit to that theory.
Another guy I got is Dr. Thomas Neil Cream. He was also a convicted killer, but for poisoning. One of the reasons he is believed to be Jack is because when he was being hung,
I am Jack.
Yeah, were his alleged last words. It's like, well, that seems pretty straightforward.
But again, you do have a lot of people coming taking credit for killings that they didn't do.
Right,
What's that dude, Henry Lee Lucas or whatever, who's notorious for admitting to tons of murders that he didn't commit. One that was more of a modern supposed revelation was a man named James Maybrick. In the 1990s. Michael Barrett published what he said was a diary that had been given to him by a friend. That was supposed to have been this James Maybrick's diary, and in the diary he confessed and gave details to all of the murders.
Shit. But again, it's the 90s, so all those details
were obviously. Well,
I guess they could date the paper, right?
So that's what they ended up doing. And at first, it seemed like the diary was legit when they tried to do dating on it. It was written in Victorian ink. It was on the right kind of paper. But then Barrett ended up confessing that he and his wife had created the diary. And then he retracted that confession, and then he retracted his retraction to the confession, and then he retracted his retraction to the retraction to the retraction. So really kind of the most reliable person we could be getting information from.
Can you get in trouble for that?
As long as it's not in a court of law, it doesn't matter.
It's like falsifying evidence.
And if he sold it to somebody, it could be considered fraud, I guess, and then he could maybe get in trouble for that.
Weird.
But so there was that, and then also in the 90s, a pocket watch was discovered that inside had the inscription James Maybrick, and then it said "I am Jack," and then had the initials of all of the victims. But again,
that sounds
could have been manufactured by somebody wanting to get on Antiques Roadshow or whatever. So
a couple of the other possible realistic ones I have are Montauk Druitt, another suspect.
This one made me sad because from what I heard, it sounds like this man just was gay, potentially, and committed suicide. And because he happened to commit suicide at the end of the murder spree, the newspapers were just like, that's the Ripper, and he killed himself.
Well, I mean, from what I heard, he was led to believe that he was sexually insane. And then his own family suspected him of being the Ripper. But then, he committed suicide a month after Mary Kelly's murder. And so that's part of the reason people believed that it stopped. I didn't hear I
think the whole sexually insane was because he was homosexual, and that's part of why he ended up killing himself, because it was not a great time to be homosexual.
The last one I have on the realistic theories is Frederick Deeming. He was in Australia. That's where he was killed. But he murdered his wife. He murdered two of his wives and his kids. And similar style with their throats being cut.
Obviously, there are also characters from the other people who were witnesses and things like that, who were claimed at one time or another to possibly be involved, like Charles Cross from the first killing,
AKA Charles Allen Lechmere.
Yeah, he was on a short list of potential people, and
so this was the man. Yeah. This is the one that's actually one of my favorites in terms of this could potentially be the dude. Because he's one of the two men that found the first body and decided they were going to continue going off to work. And when the second man came and discovered him, Charles was already there with the body, and he went, "Oh, I just discovered this woman." But if you think about how the police said that she had died so closely to being discovered, a lot of people believe that Lechmere had been in the act of killing and mutilating her when he was discovered by Robert Paul and was like, quick second decision, I'm going to pretend that I'm an innocent bystander. When you look more into Lechmere, he ended up giving information to the police under a different name. He was going as Charles Cross instead of his actual name, which was Charles Lechmere. He was also a meat cart driver, so he had a reason to have blood on him. He had experience with butchering and meat. And his route to work every morning conveniently crossed through all of the neighborhoods where the killings happened and around the same time in the morning when they would have happened.
That's crazy.
So
going to work at 1 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, people in London who are trying to make a living.
That's crazy.
Another one that's potentially reasonable is Joseph Barnett, who was Mary Kelly's partner shortly before she was murdered. She was the final murder. They broke up like 10 days before she was murdered. They had been living together in the apartment where she was found.
This one to me doesn't seem like a Ripper.
Yeah,
I don't know. This one seems far different.
This is why people think that potentially Joseph Barnett murdered Mary Kelly and made it look like a Ripper killing to get suspicion off of his back, because he hated the fact that she was a prostitute, and so people believe that he may have been killing other prostitutes as a way to kind of scare her out of that life and to take out his aggression about wanting to be with her, but she was sleeping with a bunch of other men. He also is theorized to have had a key to the apartment she was murdered in, and the door was locked when the police arrived, and so people were wondering, how did the killer get in, kill her, and then leave and lock the door behind him? Joseph Barnett said that it was one of those latch locks that when the door closes behind you, it locks, and that they had to get in by reaching through that hole in the window and unlatching it from the inside. But a lot of people are still going, well, there was a missing key that was reported missing from that apartment, and so people think that Barnett had the key and was able to get in there and kill her because he was upset about the breakup and about the prostitution, and may have been the Ripper, or may have just been the man who mutilated her out of jealousy, and then it got included in the canonical 5 for the Ripper.
Yeah, there are a few other people who are on the list who are like pie in the sky shit, or like things that have been theorized by people who were born well after these killings took place. Like there is a killer by the name of Mary Piercy, who killed 2 people around that same time
As a woman, right?
Yeah, as a woman, and was referred
Jill the
to
Ripper.
as Jill the Ripper.
Yeah.
And then they were claimed by a writer in the 1930s that they possibly could have been the one who did it.
Yeah, so I think it was Aberline who first came up with the idea that it could be a woman.
Yeah, but I think most experts agreed that the killings, especially with the sexual nature of them, seemed to have they had to have been done by a man. Like the MO didn't. I mean, of course, it's possible that it was a woman, but it seemed like the fact that this person was able to overpower these women and work so quickly and had that sexual twist to it. Sounds more like it was a man.
One of the other wild theories I came across was that it was a Masonic conspiracy surrounding the royal family.
So I do want to get a little bit into this because I watched the movie From Hell last night, which is the Johnny Depp starring Jack the Ripper movie based on the Alan Moore comic From Hell. The title obviously comes from the letter. Which
I didn't know.
Yeah, this comic is absolutely insane and really drives with the theory that this was all connected to Prince Albert Victor, the Duke of Clarence and Avondale. So the idea here is that Prince Albert was had a couple-year relationship with a lady of the night, and married her and fathered a child with her. When the Queen and the rest of the royal family found out this was happening, they wanted to cover up the obvious potential, because that kid would have been the heir to the throne. So in order to shut everybody up, they found out all of the prostitutes who knew anything about what had happened between Prince Albert and this woman, and the physician, and this is how it plays out in From Hell, the
William
physician
Gull.
ended up being the Ripper and basically assassinating these women in order to shut them up so that Prince Albert wouldn't be and then Prince Albert ended up contracting syphilis because he was historically very sexually promiscuous, contracted syphilis and ended up dying from it. And that
would make sense why there's a finite number and why they stop so suddenly, like everyone's done. we're good.
Yeah, and in the From Hell story, they end up, the physician is like part of the Masonic order, and he's got an accomplice, and so if you really want a historically accurate Jack the Ripper movie, this isn't the one for you. But if you want one that really just grabs onto one of these crazy theories and ties all of the details into it in a really interesting way, like they have the pipe smoking man was an accomplice, and they show who that accomplice was, and they show how, and they tie all these details in. And at one point, the man who's supposed to be the Ripper asks the accomplice, like, do you have some chalk? And he writes the, Jews thing on the wall.
I want to see. Is the movie any good? Have you seen it?
No.
So I had heard that it was
heard up to this point.
I had heard that it was absolutely garbage, and because of that, I actually and because of all this research, I kind of had a good time with it, because again, I'm not watching it I watched it like a Conjuring movie where I'm like, none of this actually happened, but there's enough connections to the actual things where I'm like, this is fun. They make some wild leaps in the facts, including making Aberline, who's played by Johnny Depp, an opium addict who has psychic visions of the future, and so he sees all of the murders before they happen. He also starts a romantic relationship with Heather Graham, who plays Mary Kelly.
Oh.
And they have this bit in the movie where Mary Kelly and another woman like end up switching places so that Mary Kelly like survives the murders and goes off to like live a happy life on some beach somewhere with kids. And some other woman was murdered in her place. So it borders on a little bit distasteful when it comes down to like she was actually murdered.
Yeah.
But the comic is very much like Jack the Ripper started the 20th century and like influenced the world, and there's flashes to the future and all this kind of stuff. Jeez. It's Alan Moore, so of course it's like sweeping craziness, and the movie is a dumbed down version of all of that. But if you're into watching like a weird, wacky Johnny Depp,
I've never thought, hey, you know what Jack the Ripper needs? Weird wackiness.
Yeah, and it's got the physician is played by Bilbo from Lord of the Rings. Ian Glenn, I think.
Sure.
Ian Glenn is Ian Holm.
Ian Holm.
Ian Holm. Yeah.
Another theory that some people have is that it could potentially have also been H.H. Holmes. There's not a lot of credence to this.
Outside of they were just brutal, nicely dressed men.
Yeah, my iPad corrected this guy's last name, so I don't have his last name correctly because I know it's not that. Anyway, Jeff M. Claimed that his great-great-grandpappy was the Ripper because he had diaries from Holmes. And in those diaries, Holmes stated that he murdered and mutilated prostitutes in London. This man also claimed that the man that was hanged as H.H. Holmes was an imposter that Holmes convinced to take his place in the gallows. So yeah, not sure how reliable that guy is. But you
reliable
guys,
enough to make a fucking History Channel or whatever show
like
about
American Ripper or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me what ended up happening, because I don't.
Firmly confirmed that it was not H.H. Holmes who was Jack the Ripper.
How? Just was it times did that? I mean, because
I think most of it came down to like debunking all of these diaries as like absolute.
The diaries are fake.
Yeah, basically just as a complete and total farce.
And I just feel like when you have such little evidence to go off of in the first place, don't start drawing lines across different continents and trying to connect people. It's like, no, like try to keep it local. But
because I know that Holmes, and I don't want to get too much into his history, was doing like insurance fraud way before he did the hotel stuff, right? Like he had a long history of criminal acts
before he started that hotel for dogs, right?
Yeah.
That was him.
Yeah.
If we really want to fall down the rabbit hole of crazy Jack the Ripper conspiracy theories, we got to talk about Lewis Carroll.
Yeah. So before that, there was an impressionist artist named Walter Sickett.
This was literally based on
believed.
one creepy painting he made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Lewis Carroll. I'll let you talk more about that because you did more research on it.
So the extent of this theory, and this is really what most modern ripperologists, as it's termed, ripperology is this kind of, people trying to crack the case, and a lot of the time it just ends up with people coming up with the crackpottiest of crackpotty theories. But one writer found that if you took a bunch of passages of Lewis Carroll's prose and you rearranged the lettering, it came out to a pretty convincing confession to the Jack the Ripper murders.
So you just take any letter from any word that you want? and put it anywhere.
I mean, yeah, I don't know exactly
That's
which.
writing, brother.
Well, so then basically some more modern scholars took the writing of the man who had this theory and took a bunch of his prose and rearranged it and made it say that he was responsible for Nicole Brown Simpson's murder and that he also was responsible for writing all of Shakespeare's plays. And they were like, yeah, so basically if you take enough text, you can rearrange it to say anything. So there's literally no merit to it, but I thought it was funny that somebody was like, what if the guy who made Alice in Wonderland was Jack the Ripper?
But could it be possible?
Yeah, I mean, really, the lesson at the end of this, and like I said earlier about like maybe none of these murders were connected, there's so little evidence that anything is possible. And yeah, so since then, I did want to talk just briefly to kind of wrap things up about why I think this, like the legacy of Jack the Ripper and why Jack the Ripper hit at exactly the right time and why it ended up being such a big...
Yeah, because it's been almost like 130 years now at this point, right?
Yeah, so something that I didn't know is that right before the Jack the Ripper murders happened, it had become mandatory for children to start going to school in England. And so many more people were actually literate and well-educated, not well-educated, but literate enough to read a newspaper. Newspapers were also cheaper and much more prevalent. So that combo together made it so that people were more voraciously taking in the news and the news was easier to disseminate to people.
Yeah, and became another source of income for that news source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then on top of that, like I said earlier, the police were withholding details from journalists, so journalists started inventing stories. They had already kind of had some experience with things like this with the Spring-Heeled Jack story, which is kind of potentially where the Jack the Ripper name would have come from, is that there was this, you know, more of a cryptid-style creature that was supposed to have jumped over walls and blew fire into people's faces. But yeah, in terms of the legacy of Jack the Ripper, tons of movies, tons of things have been inspired. It would be too long a list to really go into. But the whole killers having monikers and names has become a huge thing in the news and in true crime. And then I put here, the nature of the Ripper murders and the impoverished lifestyle of its victims drew attention to the poor living conditions in the East End and galvanized public opinion against the overcrowded, insanitary slums. In the 2 decades after the Jack the Ripper murders, the worst slums were cleared and demolished.
And that, I think people were saying, or at least the media was saying, that part of the reason they think that it went unsolved was because the police didn't give a shit about this area.
Yeah,
because it was such a slum.
Pretty much,
like,
which
whatever.
You see today with, you know, slums and ghettos. And by the 1960s, I think this is part of where we get the very dapper top hat cane version of Jack the Ripper, because the descriptions were so varying that if you look at a chart, there were people saying he had fair hair, dark hair, mustache, no mustache, poor looking, rich looking. The reason I think we get this, the common conception that we have, is that in the 60s, the Ripper became the symbol of the predatory aristocracy.
Yeah.
So he was more often portrayed in a top hat and dressed as a gentleman, because the Ripper represented the establishment and how the establishment was the real villain taking advantage of the lower class. And so it became almost kind of like like the face of this nebulous enemy. But yeah, I think really when it comes down to it, the biggest reason why this has lived on for so long, just like with the Zodiac, is because it's unsolved. And people want an answer to the question. And when they don't get it, it sticks in people's brains and it becomes legendary. And it's harder to strip the myth from this one because we have no idea who the actual person was. We can only just continue to speculate. And I don't think it's a crime that'll ever be solved because we don't have access to enough evidence. A lot of it was destroyed and tampered with. We just don't have, you know, I think that shawl was probably the closest thing that anybody thought would be real physical evidence, and even that's in question.
I remember when that happened, and I was just like, what the fuck? There's no way.
And they were reporting it in the news like,
no way.
This is who the killer was. We've discovered it, like, definitively. And then, you know, obviously everybody comes out and says, actually, no, it's stupid as fuck.
Well, actually. Anything else you want to add?
I mean, I don't think that anywhere in our lifetime there would be any kind of discovery.
Only have to invent time travel.
Yeah,
and
that's
go back.
Exactly what I was gonna say. The only way is if we're hopping in the DeLorean and rolling our way back, you know, and then you suffer the potential consequences of maybe getting killed by Jack the Ripper, which kind of cool.
Yeah, it changes our whole thing.
Yeah.
We need to add that victim in. And the canonical 6.
Now, literally, I have not heard a word you just said for the past like 2 minutes, because after you said hop in the DeLorean, I just started imagining some situation where it's like, Marty, we got to get back to 1888. And then Marty just showing up like, geez, Doc, there's some kind of ripper out here. It's tearing people apart.
I'd watch that.
Yeah.
When this baby hits 1888, you're going to see some serious shit. Yeah, well, felt like I needed to laugh a little bit at the end of that. It was very heavy, but that's officially the end of our nonfiction November.
How'd you feel overall? You have fun? Would you do it again?
We learned a lot.
We did. We don't know if this worked or didn't work for you guys. I know we usually stick with like the horror and sci-fi fiction side of things, so let us know if you enjoyed this, and maybe we could do some, just one-offs or another month if you're interested in that. We had a good time with it, I think.
Yeah, and we learned that the real Jack the Ripper was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. Wrap up the episode. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, you want to tell them what we're doing next?
I do want to tell them what we're going to do next. We are going to do what we are calling Cameron Christmas, because we love a good month theme and we love alliteration. And so what that is going to entail is us watching a few select James Cameron movies, which are going to include Terminator, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, Avatars, as we've been calling it, and The Abyss. So stay tuned for that. I'm pretty excited. I am interested to see how he did anything for Avatar 2. Like, it's so weird that it's been how long it's been, because it's been over 10 years now, right?
Yeah, it was 2009,
That's
right?
fucking
The first
crazy,
one.
dude. Yeah, and like you said, I don't know if it was an episode or just outside of it, but he was the first person to use
Underwater motion capture.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, and he said in a recent interview that this like break between the movies, literally the only time they were actually like their schedule got bumped was the year for COVID. And he's like, outside of that, we've been working on the sequels since the first one came out.
Holy cow.
Just in different, like, trying to get scripts down and trying to get the technology where it needs to
Yeah.
go and all this stuff.
And I think the plan for a while was to be like 2, 3, 4.
They did it.
Yeah, there was gonna be a
3
lot
is
of
mostly
sequels,
done.
Holy
4 is
shit.
partially done. Yeah, he said that Weta Digital is already working on the effects for 3.
That's
So we're going to be
fucking
getting them like boom, boom,
crazy.
boom. Yeah.
Well, good. I mean, I hope that they're as good. I mean, it
Del
was.
Toro already saw it too, and he was like, "This is Cameron, top of his form. Like, he's a master of the craft." So I don't want to hype it up too much, but I'm getting pretty excited.
I get a little
So
excited. Are you? What do you? I don't know.
I mean, I
Did you
like
the first one?
I like Cameron's work. I enjoyed my experience in the theater with that one, and none of it translated to home for me. When
I'm never
going
going to watch it again after I see it in theaters, but I'm going to be watching it in 3D high frame rate IMAX. Like, I'm there to get my brain melted by the visuals, and I couldn't care less about the plot.
He delivers the medium in the format that it's supposed to be delivered in, and I think that us seeing it in the big screen is going to be the best way to experience a movie like this, because that's, like you said, it's not going to translate to home, and so I think that we're doing ourselves a favor.
Yeah. So I mean, my excitement is very much
Reserved.
lower expectation. You know.
Get hyped.
No.
Get hyped. Do we cover in Terminator 1 and 2 next week?
I think that's the plan.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
That's what we're going to do, because those are the Cameron ones.
Yeah, so look forward to that. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this month of Nonfiction November, let us know, and maybe we'll revisit this idea in future months with different things. I know John mentioned Ashley the intern had the idea of covering the Salem witch trials, which I'd like to do at some point. So
Yeah, that sounds fun. All right. Well, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. I have been Tone.
I've been John.
And guys, I have a confession.
Oh.
I'm the hash slinging slasher. Internet darling Anthony.
Thanks again.
Keep it creepy.